Hello, this is Jeremiah Regan, and I have some great news. We've brought Hillsdale's incredibly popular free online courses to the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. The Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast brings you our online courses in their entirety, with courses ranging from ancient history and biblical epics to foundational political principles and the future of American citizenship. Follow the Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast to hear new episodes every week with additional commentary and insights from our team. Go to podcast.hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu.
We're joined today by Ian Nugent. He's assistant principal and philosophy teacher at Atlanta Classical Academy in Atlanta, Georgia, and also Aaron Schepps, who's upper school principal and literature teacher at Atlanta Classical Academy. Ian, Aaron, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Talking today about mission-driven extracurriculars. Open a question for both of you to discuss as we start things off. How do you think about school culture at a classical school?
So at Atlanta Classical, there is a phrase that we've been using for many years. We probably stole it, but at this point, I don't even remember from where. We talk about the school as a community of learners. We talk about it as almost a city within which we are citizens dwelling together, working together, and heading toward common ends. In Book 3 of The Politics, Aristotle says, in cities, there ought to arise family connections, brotherhoods, common sacrifices, and amusements which draw men together. And that from these various things, you might get some friendship. And that friendship is the end toward which the good life is ordered. And so we think about the school as a city in which friendship might arise. And so school culture and the extracurriculars that help form it ought to be ordered toward those sacrifices and amusements that might generate friendship. And this is a key to our mental model of what a school is and what our school culture is.
Yeah, and I think as we think about that, I gave a presentation earlier this year at the leadership conference and talked about something similar, extracurriculars, culture, and the three dimensions that I discussed it on were the kind of faculty culture, faculty one to each other, faculty to students, and then students to students. And so a lot of what we think about in terms of building culture through extracurriculars beyond the classroom starts with those considerations in mind, and a couple of kind of first principles that we've distilled over the years that we think are just good guidance for us as we pursue new things.
I want to ask actually from a philosophical standpoint with your students, what are the expectations for student participation in extracurricular activities?
That's a good question. I think that we don't necessarily have to expect much in order to find a lot of engagement from students, right? Often their idea of what a school is begins with those extracurricular activities. And we have, some work to do in properly orienting their affections and interests to include curriculars. But, I think that we are seeing at ACA quite a bit of engagement in athletics, in the arts, and we're getting more than half of our student population involved in both of those, which means that there are many who are doing both. And so this is going to be a common element of a school that might be relatively new in terms of what schools are providing for their students in the history of schools. But now it's a common part of what the city of a school is. And so we don't need to gin up much interest. What we need to do is direct the energy well.
Yeah. What principles? Now, you guys are both principals, PAL. but I'm asking about principles, PLE. What principles do you have when you're making decisions about extracurricular activities?
So the first one connects to my last answer about how for students often their imagination begins with the extracurricular, and we want to begin with the curricular. Right? We think that school culture begins and ends in the classroom itself, and I think that this is a particularly classical notion, and it's an important principle that distinguishes classical schools, is that we don't tell our teachers, hey, you must coach something in order to form a relationship with students. You must be involved in a club in order to form a relationship with students. In fact, we think that the relationship begins in a kind of electric engagement with great content in the classroom itself. And so that's going to be our starting off point, right? As we're going to talk today about the other things aside from the class, we have to begin with the classroom, the pedagogy in the classroom, and the content that we are choosing to foreground in our curriculum. So principle number one is school culture begins and ends in the classroom itself.
Yeah, and on the second principle we've come to is one that was basically the thesis of my previous talk, which is that everything good at our school, as we've reflected in the last 11 years, started with the teacher. It was their vision, it was their initiative, it was their relational capital with students. And to Aaron's point, it is exactly that order. Students fall in love with the curriculum because of the teachers, because of their love for the content. And students then love what their teachers love because they love their teachers. And if that teacher is then their cross-country coach, if they are leading, the debate club, if they are going to be a house leader and they're going to, want to serve them as an elected student body official, those are the things that really motivate students, right? It really, I think increasingly we've started using the language of love to describe just the mover of everything good in our school. And so the second principle is that wherever we look at our school and say, this was a beautiful thing and that we've now perpetuated, or like, where was this kind of sui generis thing that is so good? Where did it originate? And it always came from the relationships that teachers have, one with each other and then with their students. And the second or the third one is something that we have not necessarily perfected or in any way learned well ourselves. But the third one is that leaders specifically need to learn the art of saying yes and no and how to do that well, which seems, maybe trite, but it really is tough when you're in an environment, you're in a society, as Aaron's already described, where you are seen as kind of leaders and people have expectations. They want their voices heard. They also want excellence. They want the best. And what is the best is often contested. And what will lead to the end of fulfilling our mission of graduating knowledgeable, virtuous citizens, how do you actually know what things will lead to that end outside of the curriculum? So answering questions like that, especially when there are lots of interested parties, students, parents, teachers, community members, is a really tough thing to do. And so learning to engage in a prudential way with those really tough decisions is our third principle that is always a work in progress, I think.
Ian, is there a particular extracurricular program that Atlanta Classical Academy has decided to stop doing as a school?
Yeah, so we didn't say this at the beginning, but we organized our presentation around these kind of three categories of extracurriculars. The things that we have killed, the things that we have kept, and the things that we don't know about yet. So a lot of things that we're starting or are still working out. And so even though it's a bit violent of an analogy, we have killed off something that we started 3 years ago, which was our daily advisory period. And our hope initially with this was to create a small time and space inside the school day between the bells for students to engage in smaller groups and in mixed groups, grade-wise, with teachers, and then for them to talk about things that they just don't have kind of the space or the time for when they're doing a really rigorous curriculum in the classroom 7 hours a day. And so the thought was, we are trying to answer the question, what are we really doing intentionally beyond just believing that the curriculum is going to teach our students these really important moral and kind of practical life lessons? And how are we mentoring them? How are we supporting them in ways that our curriculum can't address just by virtue of what its nature is? Because some students, right, who are the most engaged and have the most support at home or have a relationship with their teachers are going to have that naturally, right? They're not going to need it. But the students who are more reticent, who don't have support at home, who don't have the ability to stay after school or to come early because they rely on transportation beyond their own families. Those kinds of students, we started thinking about what are we really doing for them. And so the model initially was we want 10 minutes, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. Students in middle school are mixed between 7th and 8th graders, divided by gender. We wanted to promote intergrade relationships, and the same thing with the high school, gender segregated but mixed grade by grade. And the model initially we thought was, all right, Monday, we all need to check in, right? So the group is assigned to a teacher. The teacher leads a brief discussion asking about people, how their weekend was, previewing some of the big things that are happening in the week. And then for the first semester, they should all spend a good amount of time kind of interviewing one classmate or advisory mate a week on Mondays, and just get to know them really, really deeply as a person. And that actually worked for the first little bit. It was actually, I think, interesting for a lot of students to hear more about students that they had no reason to talk to otherwise because they're in different grades. And then Tuesday, they would discuss some kind of practical skill development or an area of kind of struggle and weakness for them as a group or as like individuals, so that students could, offer suggestions, teachers could help them be accountable and supported. And things like that really started to help when we did things like our February freeze, which we don't have time to talk about. But it was just a really cool initiative that required a lot of kind of regular contact from teachers to students. And then Wednesday was this kind of moral virtue centered discussion of some poem, quote, or a short piece of literature, so that we would have the language and the thinking of virtue present in a different and smaller context than a normal classroom, which they would kind of experience on a daily basis. And then Thursday is going to be just like a fun day where the advisory decides on a tradition. Some played chess, some had workout competitions, some had donuts, some listened to music, whatever it was, but they just did that and they enjoyed something that they all loved together. The issue was that we found teachers were much more burdened by this than we anticipated. We thought, 10 minutes, we will kind of provide a kind of broad framework for how they should, think about those discussions and engaging with students. And the reality is that teachers, especially in the upper school, they're finishing their first period class, then they're running to an advisory room, and then they might be moving across campus for their second period class. They have 2 to 4 preps. They have 4 to 6 teaching sections. They have all their grades. So and then on top of all that, they were just kind of assigned this duty, and they don't necessarily know these students because they're mixed from grades. And so they haven't taught some yet, or they may haven't taught some, or they may have taught some years ago. So that aspect, because of there was not a natural connection between the teachers and the students, or the students themselves, and the fact that it was a much more kind of onerous burden just of the logistics of the day, really led to just a kind of devolution of the time period being either a kind of frustrating time for teachers really trying to force a natural and productive discussion to happen where students felt comfortable to open up, or because that was so frustrating, it just kind of devolved into kind of hangout time that didn't really do much. It was just kind of a break between classes that students would kind of lay on the ground and have a nap maybe, or they would play kind of a silly game, or they would go and shoot hoops on the basketball court. Regardless of which direction it went, it wasn't accomplishing the end that we were hoping for, which was we want like a really active and intentional student formation toward virtue. And so that was the main reason we killed it. It was not universally true, I should say. There were plenty of advisories, and I think it wouldn't be surprising for you to hear a lot of the young ladies' advisories were much more relationally oriented, were much more productive. They were much happier, and really liked it as a time to connect with each other. But that's also one of the things, so it wasn't universally true, and that felt like too much of an investment for the return we were getting. And then also we are really, really trying to reach our young men. And so that was like a big point of failure. So for those reasons, we have decided after 3 years of really intensive investment and trying to get it right, it's not worth it right now.
You did 3 years, right? How quickly did you know that things weren't going the way you thought they were going to go?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think it was obvious somewhat quickly, and we decided to try to evaluate and improve initially and not surrender. So we had a redesign after probably in the middle of year 1, and then especially between year 2 and 3. And ultimately, I think as you might hear in Ian describing it, there's a lot to recommend this program, right? I mean, he almost made a sales pitch for it before saying we killed it. And I think that that's actually important to note, that there are good things that you must move away from because you must use your resources, and those resources are your teachers and their time and energy and attention. You got to use those well. So that might include sacrificing something good that will be missed. And that's going to, advisory is going to be an example of that for us.
Aaron, what's perhaps one unique program at Atlanta Classical that you guys have decided to invest in as a school?
That's a good question. There's, as you might be picking up, there's a lot that we try to do, and we've been blessed with great teachers and good resources and a lot of energy at Atlanta Classical in our first 11 years of existence. So within the school week, in the school day, we have another time period we've set aside at the end of the week that we call CAV period that we're going to keep. It's the last 45 minutes of the week. We shorten our periods on Fridays, and we do something different at the end of the week, and that's been an important thing we're keeping. We have some programs in art and athletics that we've developed, especially in art and then further academics, that we call our scholars programs, that are certificate programs that students can invest in heavily and receive a certificate upon graduation if they complete those programs. In the realm of events and trips, we have an 8th grade event that we do at the end of every year with our 8th graders. It's kind of a convocation, moving them between middle and high school, and across the grades 6 through 12, we have a strategic rhythm of trips that we try to have each year, sometimes just a single night, sometimes 2 nights. One of them is just a day trip, but those are important bits of leisure and retreat with our students. But the one that I was going to expand upon a little bit is an initiative that we do every year now across 7 through 12 and bleeding into the elementary school, which is called our February Freeze. I think that Mr. Nugent mentioned it, Ian mentioned it a moment ago. It's something that we have really focused on with our 7th and 8th graders, but have expanded in kind of a voluntary way to our high schoolers, which is all around technology use. And we've created a competition and a set of incentives and installed some time for conversations in February, an outside speaker and some regular check-ins with teachers. That's all about getting students to be intentional about their attention and recognizing how technology is pretty active in forming that attention. So this has been something we've added to our annual rhythm each year, added to our curriculum itself. For that month, we're going to challenge our students to limit their social media access, put their phone away at a certain time, and limit their time on their phone, really, period. And this has been an initiative that we have determined fits well within our desire to form our students as citizens of this place, of this little city we call Atlanta Classical, because we know that we need their attention to be on what we want to put in front of them, and that technology is intensely disruptive of that. And so that's an example of an initiative outside of the curriculum itself that we've put a lot of attention on, that I would recommend other schools consider in a similar vein.
Talking with Aaron Schepps and Ian Nugent, both from Atlanta Classical Academy in Atlanta, about mission-driven extracurriculars. Aaron, what's one thing that Atlanta Classical is working on launching as a school?
This is a good question. I'll give what might seem like a small answer. It might seem like a small thing compared to some of the other things we've talked about. But Ian talked about killing advisory, and that it was a 15-minute period in each day. And we aren't changing our school day. And so where is that time going? We are actually moving that time to our lunch period, which has been about 25 minutes long between 2 passing periods. In the early years of the school, we had a different schedule design. Lunch was much longer. And we've recognized that we've just been missing that kind of quiet and leisurely time with our students, where teachers can connect with students in a less structured way. And so rather than the structured advisory in the middle of the morning, we've taken that time and we've been able to attach it to our lunch. And we will have lunch as an entire upper school, 7th through 12th grade, every day. And it's about a 45-minute period with passing periods now attached. That's going to allow us to do more with that time. And again, that might sound like a very small thing, 10 minutes added to lunch, but we expect that it's going to be an imaginative space in which teachers and students can project into, and as they consider the value of spending time together. Mm-hmm. And that's an important thing to happen within a community of learners. You need people to enjoy one another, and that's what we hope is going to happen at lunch.
Ian, Aaron, any any parting words or words of encouragement for school leaders as they look to the fall with anticipation, perhaps a bit of trepidation for the next school year?
There's a classical saying, a saying that I think is said often at our kind of schools, and that is that the teacher is the text. So I just want to pick back up on what Mr. Nugent was talking about in our second principle, that everything good starts with a teacher. In the class, obviously that is the case, but that's going to be the case outside of the class as well. You need to kind of find your people, find what they love, and then empower them to share what they love with your students. In a poem, William Wordsworth said that what we have loved, others will love, and we will show them how. And again, that starts with the curriculum. It starts in the classroom, but it's going to be the same principle that drives great extracurricular activities at your school. And that's going to start with your people. And I think that one of the brilliant things about extracurriculars is that the student can sometimes become the text. The student's love can be what drives the energy around extracurricular things at your school. It's going to start with your teachers, and they can lead students toward that. And so I would say, just remember what's great about those who are on your team as you go into this year. Let your imagination as a leader attach to those people, and then think about how to put energy and resources behind what they love.
Ian?
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. From my father raising me to my greatest mentor, I have had this kind of through line in my life being that relationships are the beginning and end of everything. And as a teacher, as Aaron's saying, that is the core of everything. If I would tell school leaders as often as possible to lean into just the relational life of the school and to encourage their faculty to do the same. And where you see faculty members who have a particular gift for building the culture of relationship with their students, between the students themselves and then around what they love as teachers, elevate those people and empower them to go after things and make things happen. And when you do that, I guess on a practical piece of advice, I don't think you can overthink, over-organize, or over-theorize the initiation of anything. As Aaron was saying earlier, around just even good things, you should move away from at times because they are not the best, or ultimately they are pulling in some way in a direction that is not the ultimate end. And so it's very often the case, as I look back on our history, that the things that we have not met our potential on or haven't executed on in a way were ones that we thought, oh, this is just a great idea. We have great people. This is a kind of beautiful vision and kind of broad structure. And we did not get granular. We did not invite the right parties into planning and making that thing actually happen. And so if there's a thought in any of your minds for starting something new, make sure you have the right people at the table, take their word seriously, and know that there is just nothing, even a good thing that can be done that doesn't have downstream effects that are going to need to be mitigated or hopefully kind of preempted by having a really good team to make something happen.
Ian Nugent is assistant principal and philosophy teacher at Atlanta Classical Academy, and Aaron Schepps is upper school principal and literature teacher at Atlanta Classical Academy as we talk about mission-driven extracurriculars. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast.
Thanks so much for having us, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. This is great.
I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K12. That's Hillsdale_K12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio.